Hey, Jeff, we can't see your screen online anymore. Oh, there you go.
This is the second meeting of Otter Creek Road Traffic Calming Project. We are in the room waiting to start here. We'll be started here momentarily. Thank you.
We're not ready. I think all of you know Andy Henderson, our councilwoman. He's got remarks, a brief introduction, and then we'll get underway.
Well, thank you all for having me for what is kind of round two of this process. I know it's a little earlier in the pandemic when we attempted to do this kind of online only. We had a few technical difficulties. I know Mr. Gentry had some difficulty hearing the meeting, and I'm not sure if that was true for others among you. So we wanted to make sure that we had an in-person opportunity, and then subsequent to that first meeting, some of the questions that were kind of, registered at that time, make sure that the presentation reflected those. What I asked for Mr. Hammond to make sure to do is contextualize this for you all. I think that's helpful for council members in the context of what you experience every day, right? So you've got a certain kind of, speed hump on Otter Creek. You've got some other things over on Robert E. Lee that you've experienced. But I have spoken with Mr. Gentry in the past about y'all's concerns.
What is this? What are we calling this? Otter Creek
neighborhood
Traffic Calming?
But you have a very, very popular state park with, millions of visitors. And so this is part of our kind of neighborhood traffic calming, but again, uniquely positioned just because of the traffic and the demand. And so in putting this kind of in the queue for this program, I had asked staff to please consider, as we do in all these projects, about all the different ways that people can get to this this park that has somewhat of a parking problem, right? People come and they rotate around, and that increases the traffic because they don't find a place to park, so then they circle back. And so it has been one of my goals in public service to make sure that as many people as possible that could feasibly and enjoyably walk and bike to this park can. But I think, as you all know, that's pretty challenging once you kind of, you take the Forest Hills Greenway that they're working on, and they have a Greenway group and are hoping to expand and extend that. So look for them. There's a nonprofit doing that work now. And but once you kind of dump right into Otter Creek, it is a very constrained roadway. We've got people walking in the roadway and so forth. So I know you guys are kind of getting blocked sometimes as people stack up to go into the parking lot. So a lot of concerns converging here, all of which have been conveyed to staff for their analysis. And so Mr. Hammond represents Birch Transportation, who's a contractor that works with our Nashville Department of Transportation, formerly Public Works. He used to be in the Department of Public Works. So we've known Mr. Hammond a long time. He does great work. And then I want to make sure not to forget and acknowledge our Vice Mayor, Jim Shulman, who is here joining us this evening. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Hammond, and I look forward to seeing your.
Great. Thank you, Councilwoman Henderson. Thank all of you for being here and taking your time and showing an interest in this project. We appreciate it very much. I'm going to try to be respectful of that time, be as efficient as we can and get through this information. We are going to step back a little bit and talk about some of the basics about traffic calming, why the street's in the program and that kind of thing. So we'll cover that pretty quickly. Then we'll get into the plan as it exists for the street. And then we'll wrap up with talking about some next steps so make sure everyone is clear about where we're headed from here. I want to be sure, I think we've got a couple of people joining us online. That's why I'm talking through this headphone and look really strange. And that's because I'm trying to make it as clear as possible for the folks online. This will also be recorded. So if you have a neighbor that wasn't able to be here tonight and is interested, we'll make that link available, and then they can kind of relive this meeting at their convenience. As Ms. Henderson said, I'm Jeff Hammond. I'm a contractor with the Department of Transportation. You see that NDOT. You may not be used to seeing that. That is Nashville Department of Transportation and the formerly Public Works Department, who has purview over the right-of-way, traffic operations, safety, all things street and right-of-way, and so we represent that department. Most of you are familiar with the traffic calming program, at least somewhat. It is a residential street program, and we focus on physical solutions. We do some education component to that, but we find that there's nothing like an obstacle in the road if we're going to slow traffic down. We've tried other things, and we've got some striping things and some signing things that we can do, but we've had the most success with those physical solutions.
What is traffic calming?
Speed. That seems obvious, but that is as opposed to trying to divert traffic somewhere else and keep traffic out of neighborhoods. We really don't try to do that. We try to keep traffic where it is and not push it to some other street. We just try to get traffic to operate responsibly at a slower speed. If you're online and you can find the mute button, if you could mute, that would be appreciated. And also, we try to focus more on the entire street, not so much a spot issue. That's not so much here. This is a short segment. This is about 800 feet, and it's one of the shortest segments we have done. But I'll take that out. We try not to focus on real spot locations. We have other tools for that. Covered a lot of that. We do have somewhat of a resource limitation, more on staff time as much as anything. We'll cover that in just a second. This is very much an in-demand program. We like to always pitch Hub Nashville when I say that we have other ways to affect a change that may fall outside of the toolbox that we have here in traffic calming. This is a great place to go. It's a good first stop for anything that you have and any request you have of Metro government. It's hub.nashville.gov, and not just in NDOT's world, but all departments are represented there, and it's a great stop. When we look at how much demand there is in Davidson County and you guys and some of the speeding issues that have been noted here and safety concerns, you're not alone. So I always like people to know that this is not unique to their street, unfortunately. Some streets rise above others, though, and we'll look at that prioritization about how we arrive at these streets. But in this latest application period that we have, yours goes back a while, I know, but in the latest one, we're looking at over 400 streets. They have requested traffic calming like this one was in some form or another. Contrast that with what we're able to take on. We take on about 25 projects in 2 windows a year. So we take about 50 projects on a year. Most of those have 1 street. Occasionally there'll be 2 streets or something, but we're not able to knock a dent in that 400 very quickly. So we really try to do more work on the front end to get those most needed projects identified. And this is how we do it. Now, this has changed a little bit. You guys were selected back in, I think, August of 21. And so it was a little bit of a different prioritization method at that point. And this was the one that fell under. You guys had some crashes, and that was one of the things that put you up there. But safety-related numbers, actual speeds that are measured on the street and crash numbers are 70% of the score, and then the other 30% are more about active transportation. Do you have safe accommodations? You don't here. By safe accommodations, we mean sidewalks, we mean bikeways and those types of things. And do you have opportunities for walking? Here, you certainly do. You got one of the great destinations in the city, and but but that's just one. There are some neighborhoods that have, you know, they got a school, they got a park, and they got a school, and they got transit service, and they got this and that. So you have a wonderful one here. So you're kind of middle of the pack in that category. So anyway, roll all that together. The long and short of all of that is Otter Creek Road is in the program. And so now it's up to you and this group to decide, you know, what, if anything, are we going to do about traffic calming on the street.
We'll look at that.
The limits of this are Otter Creek Road from Granny White to the trailhead. As I mentioned, that's about 800 feet. That's really all of
cones yellow.
Otter Creek Road that is in a metro street. I think it's true, isn't it, Councilwoman, that it switches on the other side of right, and then I guess becomes a state facility if we go any past Shenandoah. So it's just this one little section here. A little bit about the process that we use and where we sit tonight. So, of course, we've been through the application process. We've been through the prioritization. We had meeting one, as was mentioned, that was an online meeting. That was back in May. So it feels like it's been a really long time. And we've done the design work, and now we're here at meeting two. Where we're going after tonight, and we have our discussion tonight, if we arrive at a consensus in this, we'll move on to an online ballot process. I'll talk a little bit more about that, and then a construction. And I think I have a slide that kind of details some of the time frame on those things. So let's talk a little bit about the plan. Unless there's any questions about why we're here, the traffic calming program itself. We'll talk about what's planned. Before we do that, I'd like to kind of set some definitions, because I'm going to show you, you know, what's included in the plan, and it's good to know what we're talking about. We're proposing speed cushions. There are some many people probably in Nashville that say traffic calming is the speed cushion program. You could be forgiven for thinking that, because we put these on a whole lot of our projects. We're trying to work some other types of traffic calming devices in. There are those. We shared those back in the spring. But you have a very narrow road. It's about 20 feet wide from edge of pavement. There's not a lot of room to work and do some of those other types of things. And so speed cushions, like most neighborhoods, are what we're proposing for this street. Let me point out a little bit about speed cushions, because, as was mentioned, there are multiple devices that are in use. Metro uses one standard vendor. Now, there are a couple of different configurations within that, but for the most part, they're all going to operate and feel pretty similar to each other. The speed cushion, what gives it that name as opposed to speed hump, speed table, speed bump, is those cushions are kind of like little cushions on the road, like little pillows. They come in individual segments, and we use those more often than not because of the reduced impact on emergency vehicle response. So a larger wheelbase vehicle, like a fire truck or an ambulance, has an easier time getting over it. It doesn't negate an impact to them, but it does minimize that to some degree. So you can see right here, these are kind of angled down on the edges, and so you know, again, a larger wheelbase truck can come closer to straddling that than not. When you drive over these right in the center, you get the most impact. That's where you go up. The full height of those on the cushions that we use is 3 inches. I'm going to show you a different look that kind of compares that to some of the things that you may be familiar with. Same density, yes. It's the same rubber.
Although,
yeah, it's the same density in the rubber. Now, does that loosen up over time? I don't know, but yeah, we're using the same product there. This one is a little bit different than these. There's a subtle difference there. In that this is a little bit of a longer one. You see that middle section there? That's going to make it longer, and that's going to make it a little more gradual. So the ones in Hillwood on Breslin are the little bit longer ones. Okay, those are 10.5 feet long, as opposed to what we use probably most often are the 7-foot ones. The 7-foot ones should actually be more aggressive. It's a shorter run out, so you gain that 3 inches over a steeper over incline and back down.
Like 7 hours
one.
to like bar hop through all of
We're
the
beginning to use the 10.5 more in suburban areas like this, like Hillwood. We tend to use those most aggressive ones in higher density locations. But that's all up for discussion, and that's one of the things we have to work with. We typically center them up in a lane here. Sometimes the street's super wide and we have to use more than 2. We don't have that issue here. So the application, if we were to use it, would look very similar to this, where you've just got 2 pads, one on either side of it.
Are you looking at more than one?
Location? Yes, sir. Yes, sir, we are. So what we have to do is, or what we like to do, if we were looking at a full mile road, which we don't have here, but if we were looking at that, we like to space them about 400 to 600 feet apart. And we know by doing that, we get a good consistent flow speed. It's long enough that it's not just totally obnoxious, but it's short enough that you don't really have time to cross over them, speed up, slow down, cross over the next one, speed up, we find that if we can get about somewhere around 500 feet,
My time to leave.
that gives us pretty good experience on that.
I hope this meeting
Sure. Would it make some sense?
presentations is worth it.
On the other side. In other words, not have a bump right on the south side.
Every second.
Just have it on one side of down at one end and on the other side of the other.
Yeah, one of the things that we know happens if we don't go all the way across the road is people drive around them. They'll drive right around them. They won't think twice. Even to the point where when we have a really wide road like that, and it's gradual enough, and you've got a gravel shoulder, they will drive off the road around the shoulder. Now, would that happen here? Probably not. Probably not. So you got to think we're working with all of Davidson County. In some neighborhood in the context that is more rural or whatever, and people are just bound to determine, I'm going to maintain 40 miles an hour down the street. I don't care what they put, and they would do something like that. Here, I think we're working with a different traveler on average. So I'm not too worried about that, but I would think if we only put a pad on one side, they will easily drive around that. So just some other images here about the speed cushion. So here's a little more in-depth information that we never showed. We developed this for this group, and we've not used this anywhere else because people aren't as familiar. You guys do have an experience with some other cushions around, and so we thought this might be helpful. So at the very top, this probably gets way over technical anyway, but Robert E. Lee, those are about 24 feet long. They're really long. Those are site built out of asphalt. And so they use a little bit of a different profile, and it's about 5 inches tall. Now that height, I think, makes a big difference. Ours are 2 inches shorter than that. And it's parabolic. I mean, it's just kind of rounded on top.
What's your objection?
I don't have an objection to them. It's more for you're familiar with them, and so I'm pointing out that they may have a little bit of a different feel characteristic. So if you're driving them and you're thinking, I hate those things on Robert E. Lee, I certainly don't want those. These aren't quite those. Okay. The Radnor Lake ones right outside the door here that are kind of, I think they came originally with the park or something. They're really beat up. They're in pretty rough condition. The profile on those, it's a little hard to tell. The asphalt's so beat up. It's taller than what we're proposing. It's hard to tell how much. It's 3.5, it's 5, it's somewhere in there, but they are longer. Those are 12-foot cushions. Again, site built. Those have not fared as well. I think the Robert E. Lee ones are still in pretty good shape, if I remember right. The ones we use, again, Metro wide, are made out of rubber. They're not site built. We like that for a couple reasons. One is we know what we're getting. So we're not dependent on a contractor to go out there and build it, that everyone he builds may feel a little different when you drive over it. So we can tell you, Breslin's a great example. Drive those. I can't, if you like them, great. If you're not, that's kind of what you're going to be, experiencing there. We have them in other places, the shorter ones as well. But But that's one positive to those. They're also holding up really well. We've had some of these out 10, 15 years, and they still look new. So I know that's important too in neighborhoods that stuff look nice as well. So anyway, it's more of an angular profile. It's a little bit shorter. We do have them around. We can give you a more complete list of where these are if you're interested in going out and finding them in a neighborhood. And I just think that's the best way for you to have a good understanding about, what these are and how they feel.
Mr. Hammond, you speak to effectiveness, right, of vertical measures. I know my Castle neighbors were a little nervous about these, it's earlier in the cycle program. And, subsequent to that, I have an inbox full of, we thought we would hate these, but we love them, and they're fine, and they're great, and yay. And so can you speak a little bit to the effectiveness? Because I think and I remember when I was meeting with them, they thought, this is not going to do anything.
Right.
And they have, from their experience on that cut through street, found them to be very effective. So can you speak to why something that looks so much smaller, say, than all those others, is indeed effective?
It is. I don't know that all I can tell you is it's not, it is an obstacle in the street. And so that's what forces you to slow down. You don't want to hit it at a high speed. We have not had a lot of complaints about it tearing things up or anything like that. It just is not comfortable to do that. I do have some data. I took the slide out, but I've got some data actually from the Breslin. I know we keep going back to that, but it was one of our first installations of 10.5 feet. And so the best way that we have found to measure the effectiveness of that is to actually go out and do what we call a floating car method. It's really just following a car, try to stay a consistent distance back and time how long it takes. And you can actually see kind of that speed profile about they do go and they slow down as they approach the speed cushion, and then you can kind of gauge how fast are they speeding up and slowing down. And we found, you're going to think I'm lying, but we found the average speed over that project is about just a little under a mile. The speed over that was like 24.9 miles an hour if you look at the average. So right at the speed limit, exactly what, the way we would want them to do it. If we just look at a limited sample, that's what we found. Now, of course, there's some variation in that. Some cars go faster over them. Some cars slow down and they're crawling over these things, which is really not necessary, but they do. So you find all kind of different things, but when you average it out, that's what we found. Now, again, here, I think it's a little different. We're not dealing with a mile or so. And so, I don't think our speed is as high to begin with. And so you're probably not going to see a huge speed reduction right off the bat in the same way.
The people that come off of Granny White reach a pretty high speed pretty quickly before they finish coming in that first curve. So I may get used to it. There's frequent here to not do that after a while, but positioning will be, I think, critical because of the short distance. But because of the speed coming out on a big product, young people are
Sure. Well, let's look at that. I think that's my next slide. So this is probably not the most visible. This is actually a plan. This is actually a excerpt from the actual design plans that we have put together to this point. Nothing's final. We can change it, but let me point it out. So you see Granny White Pike going up and then Otter Creek Road coming down. So the intersection you're talking about is right up there at the top. The first, we're planning for two locations. Okay, so again, from here to here is about 800 feet. Typically, we would have kind of put one right in the middle. But thinking about those types of dynamics, we scooted one a little closer up to the intersection and one a little further back. And we think we've got a pretty good, spread there in between those two. So we've got two sets. You can go into the details and see exactly how far that we're planning to put them from. We a lot of times measure these from driveways. One reason is because you all can go out there and you know where your driveway is and you can kind of gauge that. It's also easier for our contractors to find that. And so the first one is 77 feet east of the driveway at 1197. and then the other one is down here at 52. It's really not added. It's still a pretty good ways east of the driveway at 5201 Shenandoah there on the corner. So we do have two planned, you know.
Those are the proof.
So there's two before you get to Shenandoah.
Two before you get to Shenandoah. No.
It's 72 feet east of your driveway.
But you're 5201? Yeah, so you're the closest one to it. Yeah. So the good part here is, you know, some of our neighborhoods, as you can imagine, are pretty dense, and it's one driveway after the next. And so our minimum is 15 feet. We try not to put anything closer than 15 feet to a driveway. So here we're up in the 70s. So we've got a good long way before anybody in and out of their driveway would encounter one. But yeah, 5201 and 1197. I think someone asked, are there two before Shenandoah? That is correct. So Shenandoah's here. That next one that is actually come into this property is it's about 100 feet or so after Shenandoah. So the two, you would encounter both of those before you got to Shenandoah. I don't have the distance about what that is off the curve, but I mean, from the intersection, but I hear your point. I think that's a good point. I think we're probably close enough. So, you know, we want to be able to make that turn and not get up to speed, but not have it right there at the stop sign either.
And I think Mr. Hammond, I know neighbors have spoken about, and we have, Mr. Gentry, we called in to Metro Public Works, but there is a lot of kind of roadside encroachment from brush and so forth. So when that kind of gets up to the peak in the summer, you have a bend in the road, and you have people that are trying to walk. To your point, somebody's really accelerating on Grand White Potty, and they've maybe not visited Riding Lake enough to know that there are people walking. I think that is a concern, that somebody is walking appropriately, facing traffic, just trying to, you know, walk back on the greenway or go here or there, and that, you know, if we could catch them at the appropriate engineered place to then that really helps that. Not really one spot technically, but sort of what happens there in the first. Yeah.
Yep.
So if we do end up with these, would there be any logic to making that first one closer to Granny White?
Maybe, and I'd go back and take a look at that and kind of drive that and see, you know, what I feel like a good distance is. Maybe watch some traffic in and out of there, and see at what point they're getting up to speed. Right. Right.
And the balance of it that y'all are trying to strike, and correct me if I'm wrong, is so making sure that people don't have enough space in the middle to accelerate. Right.
Well, the other concern, I think, is that although we want to keep people coming off Grand White from accelerating too much, we don't want to initiate accidents. Somebody coming off and someone hitting the brakes too hard over this pump.
Yeah.
So the fact we have to be time from Granny White before there's the cushion to have recognition time that my license plate for 40 miles an hour, sometimes I'm doing 10. And so
yeah,
we can't get too close to Granny White for that.
right. Yeah, I experienced that just coming in. I mean, y'all see it all the time where you're trying to turn against that traffic on Granny White where it's a steady stream. And when you get a gap, you need to take your gap because you may sit there longer. So that point, and also what we look at a lot is making sure we're getting a good use of the cushion, not putting it too close to the stop sign when you're slowing down anyway. So, you know, most of that traffic is already going to be slowing down in anticipation of the stop sign.
Andy heard me state this before, but let me ask you to consider this to dig a little further in your toolbox. You put these speed signs over on Lone Oak, over Hill Street, other places over in Green Hills, where they're yellow, so long as you're within the speed limit and turn red. You know, to me, if you're people are going to start accelerating after this, and this is the worst place because you've got a curved road. If people are walking, as you should, on the left side, we've got bushes along here. Traffic can't see the walkers can't see that. If you start putting a speed sign there, you know, if they've already hit the bump, then it's right in their face. I think that, you know, rather than, to me, it would be a half measure. Why not, let's just go ahead and do it.
And you're talking about in addition to the two speed cushions?
Where you put them over in Green Hills, you've got sidewalks. We don't have that here. We don't even have shoulders in places.
Right.
So, to me, it's a really good safety.
Mr. Hammond, on that, go ahead, please.
Do they have illuminators for nighttime on these, or?
No,
coming in at night?
they do not. What they do have, the arrows that you saw, those are reflectives. So when the lights, your car lights hit those, they light up. But
What
they're,
about when there's time for water lines, is that affect the braking? You know, where someone can brake and slide and, you know, possibly hit a pedestrian. You know, the problem that I see, we walk a lot, is when you try to drive out from Shenandoah onto Grand Line, you've got walkers on the right, you've got walkers on the left, you've got dogs on the right, dogs on the left, and the pedestrians are in the street.
mm-hmm.
Okay, they're not off the road, and they do not yield to cars, right? And the cars coming towards you, and you're trying to navigate, and people aren't controlling their children, they're not controlling their dogs. And my question is, even though, you know, you're supposed to walk on the right side of the road, I'm wondering if it would be beneficial, safety-wise, to have only one side of the street that people can walk on. So everybody knows at least they're on just one side of the street. Because when they're all over, they are, you know, you don't even have to get people through the middle. It's really a problem.
Yeah.
And the curve that Terry's talking about is really dangerous because you come around there and walkers are coming towards you often. And you don't see them until you're almost right on them. And because people still are walking out in the dark, especially in the winter. And that happened to me driving in. I'm a slow driver, but people right there, when I come around the corner when I first moved here, where they land on my brakes, they were like in the street. And it was pretty shocking. So I'm surprised there hasn't been pedestrian.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things I think the city needs to, because we have over a million visitors. The city needs to think about a way to control the pedestrians walking, not just driving, but walking on our streets.
Yeah. The problem.
I don't know about sidewalks, but having them go on one side of the street might be, at least everybody would know they're there, and you could tune your eyes to the people being on one side of the street rather than everywhere.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's awesome. Because they're all over there, like,
There
they don't care if you're coming down the car.
No, they feel like that's the right way.
Halfway in there.
Well, in fairness, they kind of do. I mean, you know, so yeah, so we can't tell a pedestrian you can't walk on this street. Okay. Now, if there is an accommodation, well, state law for one, but also just not in the middle. You have to say, I think it's worded something like as close to the edge as practicable or something like that. 3 feet, you have to give a cyclist when you're going around them. But yeah, it's you know, you think about every street in the state of Tennessee, they're all a little different. And so, you know, you do the best you can to, but you can't write someone a ticket for walking on the side of the road. Now, if there is an accommodation there and they're not using it, that might be different. And so what you're saying is, you know, could we provide some sort of an accommodation? And of course, sidewalk is the first one that comes to mind would be wonderful. That's not in our toolbox. We all know that's really expensive. We sometimes will do this if you head down, like as you get closer to Belmont Boulevard, there's a street called Battlefield, runs right along the side of 440. You may have noticed a thing there where it had some street width and we were able to take some of that street width, still leave room for 2 lanes for cars and get about an 8-foot pedestrian path in there. That would be wonderful. We just don't have the room. It's 20 feet wide.
And I think Mr. Higgins, you shared in y'all's assessment of this, so I did ask about, available right-of-way and pedestrian side paths, and so, this is a constrained right-of-way. It's not a typical, in the battlefield situation, because of 440 and acquisition of property, it's a big flat area, right? You can come in and drop a kind of size provision for pedestrians. I think, the challenge here is the convergence of users, and, so what I have hoped is that, we might think of this kind of as a neighbor way. I mean, it's sort of a greenway extension, and we all have to kind of figure out how to work together rather than sort of just throughput from here to there. Because I think what pedestrians are doing when they're stepping further out into the roadway, I say this to my son when he bikes around, a bike in the state of Tennessee is a vehicle, you may take the lane, right? And sometimes when you hug the edge of the road, you're actually making yourself less safe, because people do close past you. And so I live in a neighborhood with a very constrained driveway, paved road, 9-foot lanes, very narrow, big ditches. And so I have always told my son to please take the lane when he bikes, because I know instead of should be safer when he does that. So when you see people in the road, I can't speak to particular individuals, your children, your dogs, but not be responsible. But I think people are genuinely doing that because they're so seeing it, and I feel like that's safe.
Well, my point is, I understand all that, and I'm not advocating for safety and all that. My point is, even in Radnor, going to Radnor, initially there was, he had it marked where if you're walking, you go, there are arrows, on that side and then arrows coming back. So what I'm suggesting is possibly there could be a sign so that, all walkers go on one side of the street. So at least they can take the lane, they cannot, but at least they would be on one side of the street where
you kind of expect them.
Yeah, well, and then they would have to be guided, right? Because that might prevent someone from being hit. You have people coming from both sides near your car and on the same road and all that. Something's going to happen.
It's worth a thought. I mean, we'll take a look at that and see if we can think of a way to do that. I mean, you do see some signs, walk on left facing traffic and things like that. So there may be a way to.
Because, I would never want to hit a dog with the owner's fault because they're not people. It doesn't matter. You go on the won't get away from the parents. Don't have to that happen.
Yeah.
So I think it's just I think one side of
It has to remain a suggestion, because you can't take away the person's right to walk on the road. It has to be signed, please walk on. It's not like it can be mandated.
right, but maybe just on one side.
Yeah, it says please walk on this side.
Right.
It's not. It can't be something that is a law, you can't take away the.
State law is if there's no provision of extra infrastructure, state law is to walk facing the traffic. Right. So, to your point, there are places where with sufficient right of way, because with flex posts, you can kind of push over, you can provide the alternative path, but you do not have the right of way here to be able to do that, and you can't take it out of the lane width. 2 10-foot lanes is what you have here. Maybe you could take 2 feet, and that would get a 9-foot travel lane. But I can tell you, we'll have 9-foot travel lanes on paved roads, just basically like truck mirrors are hitting each other. Like 9 is about as narrow as you can go.
I've had a lot of friends that have complaints on roadways where people try to avoid them, but going around and turning their.
Can I speak to that, Jeff?
Sure.
What you have here with the constrained right of way, all that brush and bushes, nobody's going to be able to do that. In the suburban, Breslin is flat, and so there is that kind of going around concern. But here, we talked about this prior to the previous meeting. Again, because the right of way is so constrained, in some ways, I think the marriage of the speed cushions with the physically constrained right of way is going to bring that speed down. And then I think the knock-on effect of that generally for safety is going to be positive.
It also doesn't be close to four and a half, keep one being able to go some
What we like to do when there's really no shoulder at all, there's really nothing to even mount a post to, like those plastic ones, we'll actually use the sign. We mount a steel, I mean, it's a street sign with a steel post. You don't want to run over that. We'll mount that closer to the speed cushion locations and let it serve as that deterrent so that, you know, we've never had anybody plow through a sign. It's not been that bad. So that's probably what we would do. Yeah. As far as the pedestrians and walking and stuff. Yeah.
Right. I concur with you because we see all over the city is, you know, do this, put this up, put it down, and that's why folks, I do like the speed cushion approach because it's an actual physical measure that their data shows slows down the traffic. And so you can encourage people, you know, with the flashing sign or whatever, and, you know, they have data that shows that the speed comes down a little with those. But sustained out over time, once people realize that, you know, kind of per state law, there is no automated speeding enforcement that follows that flashing sign, people realize effectively it's meaningless, and then they stop complying, and so you get, you know, a handful of citizens minded folks.
Still being put up in Green Hills. We don't get them here.
But I think it's because they've done the data now to recognize that they have some level of effectiveness, but for their cost, compared to the speed cushion, that's going to slow people down more than the flashing sign that costs twice as much. You know.
What is that the substitute starting to do? You know, that's on 2 not block road. Yeah, that's no good.
Well, we have.
Yeah. I think what we're all seeing is under any condition, it's a shared scenario. We have to every mode that's out there has to share it. And so we feel like the best way to do that is for cars to slow down and share it, you know, along with everybody else.
Let me ask, is there any longer term thinking, Angie, Metro? We all know that this little segment is overrun by traffic. It's going to get worse, both vehicular traffic, pedestrian traffic, and it's a narrow 20-foot road. You know, it impedes our access and egress from our properties. As Nashville grows and people want to come to the lake, which is perfectly natural, but, you know, they're going to have, 2 million people this year. It's just almost ludicrous to think that you've got 2 access roads, Otter Creek on this side, Granny White, and Otter Creek on the other side of Franklin, and you're trying to accommodate all that traffic. You know, these are kind of patches to help, but it's really not the solution. I'd like to think there's a long-term solution to address the volume of both pedestrian as well as vehicular traffic, and I don't see that.
Well,
it's not easy, I recognize.
Yes. As I understand it, they have, there was also, perhaps in the vicinity of the church that's south of the other. Okay. So they are trying to acquire other access points. I will tell you, the water parks, which are also in my district, the Bellmead entrance, the Bellmead Historic Gateway is the most popular place to go. But they work to kind of intentionally move that around and spread it out a little bit. But I reside at the most popular trailhead because it's the only trailhead that has a bathroom. And so everybody comes up there, and you're also going to Cheapwood, which is our third most popular tourist destination. And so, you know, I have said this Senator Dickerson before and then Senator Kimball now. I think we do need to partner with the state and think about, you know, this is a state asset. It's a state park. It's a very popular state park. I have asked before, you know, is there a bucket of money for safe routes to parks? It would be nice if there were. But, you know, I think it is some way incumbent upon the state to kind of figure out how to help these access points. It's something I'm asking for, but it doesn't exist presently. And so as it relates to, I think in suburban context, really the best way to reduce car traffic to a particular destination, because, you know, suburban areas are pretty sprawled out, so, you know, your ability to walk to a place is, you know, can only come from so far. And when you have every parcel kind of being an acre, that's what we call a walk shed, you know, how far can people walk to this location. But the bike shed, biking here, is a lot bigger. It's going to be increasingly bigger as e-bikes become more popular. And so, you know, as Forest Hills works to expand their greenway, all the way over to Hillsborough Heights and other places, I think, you know, just it's a little bit here and a little bit there. Trying to get more people to bike to the park, you know, fine, maybe that's all 5 to 10%. Trying to encourage people, you know, don't come here and meet up with 4 of your friends in 4 separate cars. Go to your friend's house, meet up, drive over one. You know, those all sound incremental, but I hope in the aggregate maybe they help. No, I mean, there is not some kind of larger master plan, but I have said to Senator Campbell, and I know she cares about that because she resides on Otter Creek on the other side of this park. And so I think she's going to be a good partner to kind of think about and state solutions.
What about home?
I mean, you know, I don't know, our job has knowledge about that, right? Usually, you know, free parking begets traffic, right? Because if you can come over here as 4 individuals and meet up with friends and you don't have to pay to park, you're all going to come in 4 cars. And so I'm not sure where the state is on that and how people would feel about their tax dollars paying for parks and now you have to pay to park as well. But you're not wrong about paid parking making traffic solutions. So we at the council level are working on some of that parking policy. It's called transportation demand management at a more macro level. And I really would like to see us working on transportation demand management with our cultural assets, our parks, the Cheekwood, the zoo. You know, I have said the Cheekwood and the zoo and all kinds of places. You can never build a big enough parking lot. The bigger you make it, the more people will come. You're just inducing traffic. And so, yeah, and I would ask Greg Award, and I've mentioned to the state, you have, maybe see at the airport when you go on a deck of how many available parking spaces are available here. You know, could we get to a place where you, if the parking lot is maxed out here, you don't even want people to come in and go down there. You want them to go up to the church alternative. You know, we've got a landing place on the corner. We need safe pedestrian provisions to come down from the church parking lot. But that's the kind of thing I'm talking to the state about. Like, could they pilot, you know, a solution to kind of, you know, put up a little, you know, discrete sign that says, you know, parking full, go here.
We do have to consider our neighbors at church. They get a lot of overflow. If we did charge for it, was still a consideration. There would be many more cars going to the church parking lot.
Oh, absolutely. It has a knock-on effect. You elevate the price here, people move over there, and then they, you know, they're parking on the side of the right. Everything has a knock-on effect to that. Yeah.
Is it possible for the city maybe to pay a fee to the church so they can parking lot every day on Sunday or something, pay for 3 days service?
It's a state park. So, yeah.
It's a city street problem.
Well, I say it should be a shared problem on other sectors of the state. You know, I would like to see them partner with us on route parks. So again, I tried to broach that conversation. Maybe Vice Mayor can help me with that in the last 7 months of the term. You know,
We're not thinking that.
yeah. But we're having some other issues there right now. So, but all that to say is these are conversations that I have broached that have not been particularly effective.
One other aspect on this we alluded to, and I'm sort of, I could go either way, see what y'all think about it. We've got the 2 locations here. Right now, we're showing the 10.5-foot cushion, that longer one that's a little more gradual. We could go with 7. You know, that's a little sharper.
About 16.
There's a 13. The biggest one in these cushions is 13. So it goes 7, 10.5, 13.
And aren't those different sizes? Either for different seats?
They are.
I mean,
That's right.
2 mile an hour road.
That's right.
I'm on there, you can go over it at 35 miles an hour. It's not very.
Yeah.
Yeah, but what they're proposing is 10 miles an hour for the one that's longer than the one he's proposing, the 10-foot one in Breslin. I go to Breslin over that stuff. I'm looking at it, stop. Are there, you start to mention 3 different times.
Mm-hmm.
Are there miles per hour times, 3 times?
Roughly. So the one we're proposing, we usually rate it 20 to 25. And we found in our data, again, over a longer run, we're right at 25 on average. The speed limit's 20. The shorter one, we usually rate at 15 to 20.
And so the shorter one is fast here, and that's because it's rated at 15 to 20.
Well, we're doing it more based on kind of land use and context. So right now it's proposed at 10.5, but we can go to 7. It's more about, I think in this case, it's more about comfort. And you know, I think we're going to get we're going to be probably very similar on the speed either way. I think when we're seeing 25 on Breslin, it's because it's a much longer section than 800 feet we're dealing with here. Yeah, I think so too. I think here it's more about comfort. They're going to slow down for anything that's in the road. And so, but.
Here you have a destination. Once you go over the first pump, you have a destination that you know it's short distance ahead.
Mm-hmm.
So once you decelerate the first pump, you're not obliged to accelerate hard. If you come around the corner, nothing stops you, then you can go whatever speed you want down to the destination. But I'm with you. I think that the two of the 10
Mm-hmm. 7's the short one. That's sort of what we think. That's what we have in the plan right now. So what we're talking about, we could change is going from a 10.5 down to a 7. Still keeping 2 locations. It's just a matter of how does it feel when you hit those. No. No.
Clarity to say, Mr. Hammond, if you can please clarify what you're showing and what it's rated for speed, because I think because it's such a short segment, I don't see folks' mind if we're wanting to hold people between 15 and 20 miles per hour, right? We're not trying to get a long way and, you know,
Mm-hmm.
so can you just.
So what we are showing right now is a 10.5 foot length. That's the middle grade, aggressiveness. Yep. That's rated. We typically tell people on a normal street, which I'd say this is a little different, but normal street, that's a 20 to 25 mile an hour at the point you're going to go over that thing. We can go to a 7, which would be a little slower. We can go a little longer.
Counterintuitive, though. It's shorter, but it's higher, which means that brings your speed down lower.
And also, that doesn't cause damage to suspension or residents who go over time and again.
But again, we're 3.5 inches. I encourage you to go over to Castleman and drive over them. It's not the Robert E. Lee.
Well, what about the blue lights that the police would have on the telephone poles and everything? How do you see those? Yeah, they're just right there.
Well, but all due respect, what people don't understand is I think people think that those are speeding cameras, but state law doesn't enable that, and that's not what they do.
But it's effective. It's the catch.
I know doing license plates with them. License plate readers, I think is the ones in Belmead.
Yeah.
I think they're looking at license.
I get real nervous going down there.
All right.
So it's not the speed I love.
They just use those lights.
I'm ready to go too.
Getting a ticket in the mail, 2 weeks later, after they don't do the light.
Everybody on
As long as you keep it in your yard, you can put a blue light up on a pole, I guess, if you want to. Just don't put it on the right of way.
Already, well, I think let's keep on track time-wise.
All right. So let's talk about the next step to this. Right now, I don't hear a consensus on any changes to that. Is that accurate? We're looking at those two sets.
I think there are a lot of us that like to see other options available. So if this thing's voted down, are you going to look at other options?
We can, if it's, okay. Well, let's talk about that balloting and what that process is. So,
What I'm hearing from you is that you don't like someone's on Braxton and so that you would vote against it. But I don't think you should presume that's the case for
You don't have 70%. Or didn't,
so yeah, let me clarify that process. It's not, it may be a little different than the way, in fact, I know it's different than the way it was when we met with you last spring. Okay, so I want to clarify that. That's what makes this really important. So the balloting process has changed since that point. This is one of these, we're trying to bring some conclusion to this neighborhood because you guys have been working with us for a long time, and so we want to bring it to a close. The process that we will use is the current one, which is we're going to send out cards to eligible voters. I'll talk about what that means in a second. And they're going to get a card, looks like this, looks like the one you got. Hopefully you got it for this meeting. And it's going to have a QR code on it. You scan it, and it's going to take you to a Nashville.gov page where you will be able to vote electronically. You put your name, address, and you say yes or no. I like it or I don't. There's not comment places. We're not taking other suggestions at that point. It's here's the proposal. We do have a link to those plans that you just saw, so you can get in there, you can comb through it and get as much detail as you want to about what we're proposing to install. But it's yes or no. Of all of the people that vote, we're looking for 66% of people voting for it. So if 10 people vote, we're looking for 7 yeses. It's no longer a strict 70, we need 70% of all the homeowners. That's the way it was. And so we were finding these types of meetings are going years because they're still with us. I believe we're still working. They're going door to door, and it's really a hardship on folks. So we've gone to this is much more just like a normal election. The people that vote decide, and so we're looking for 66% of all the eligible voters. So what does that mean? The eligible voters, we take people that are adjacent to the street. So several of you probably live on down in here in Shenandoah, you won't get a card, okay? Because we're looking for the people who share a property line with the right-of-way of the street. I know, and it's that way all over town. There's cul-de-sacs all over town that are affected and don't get a vote. And the rationale behind that is those people also are not as affected by the speed the way the people that live on the street are. So it's a very small population of voters, I understand. So in fact, I think it's 9 households.
So we have to just like everybody else.
That's right. And
the one on the corner, on the far side, they never even have to drive over.
that's right. So if we go into every neighborhood and every project we do and try to decide who gets to vote and who doesn't, we'll never get one done. So we're trying to we make a policy, and these are the guidelines that we follow.
We have no way to come in and out other than that. There's no other route.
It's just like any.
We don't even get
Why did we get the card in the first place?
Well, we want you to know about it. We hear suggestions and we hear things that we can change, but
we don't have the voice in
it. So you're wasting our time. If we don't have a vote, we're the people that go in and out that way, maybe 10, 15 times a day, and we don't have a vote. Why are we even here?
Well,
and you've already made up your mind, you can put people up there, whether we want them or not.
That's what we're here to discuss. And
let people on Otter Creek stay, and the rest of us can go.
not aware that this, the reason that we have had this window of time between the last meeting and this meeting is we have a new director of our Department of Transportation, Director Alice. She's gotten a lot of feedback about this program and the difficulty in delivering these safety improvements. Kind of the burden on neighbors of, going around to a large group of people to vote about things that are happening within the public right of way. And so we were told as council members that this process was going to be revised. And so, we waited till the new process was implemented with the QR codes and the mailing and all that. So I was not aware that Shenandoah Court as a point of access would not be voting. And I understand how you feel about that because you do drive over them. And so, I guess I just want to.
Did you appeal that to her?
No, she wanted.
Sir?
Since it's a national program, can it be revised to include the other people?
I have not.
I don't have the authority to do it, but sure. It's a policy that was decided.
I do believe that speed cushions are the best solution for Otter Creek to make everyone safer. That is my opinion. Okay? I'm elected to serve this district. I don't live here though. I'm telling you on my honor, it did not understand through the new process. We were just waiting generally for a new, more effective process. Mr. Hammond and I did not speak to know that that would change. Like, I didn't know that, okay? And so what I'm trying to say is I understand your frustration. But,
But a policy might change to be specific for this area.
By the same token, I do understand that NDOT has to say, whether through adjacency or, does it make much sense that one parcel that faces Grady White Pike is in? That doesn't make much sense. So, but I guess, they're being fair and saying it's every adjacent thing to the road. That's why they're sending it to them. So,
But yes, is it possible to change that policy for this particular?
I can't make that decision. Technically, sure, you could send it to any number of people. And it kind of gets to the question there about what's the red thing. So let me show you how we derive that. So using that policy of any residential property owner that abuts the property line, this is just a screenshot from Metro's mailing list developer. It's on planning's website. Anytime they do a rezoning, the developer has to send their own mail outs. So we use the same tool, and all we're doing is circling those properties that would be captured, and it generates a mailing list for us. That's what the red thing is. So, it's easy for us to draw any kind of line we want to and select any number. That's not a problem. It's more of the decision and why that decision has been reached. And, again, this is, we keep saying it, but really is a special kind of a street and a situation. If you think about Breslin may be a good example where I don't know offhand, but I can imagine there's some cul-de-sacs that come off of that. Those people don't get to vote, and they drive Breslin all the time also. And again, the reasoning there is because, some of these streets, they don't stand a chance to get them, even though we know the speeding problem is there. The people don't live on the street. They live, half a block off of it, and they're all going to vote no because they're not affected by those speeds. They may be the ones contributing to them. So anyway, that's the way it is. I totally hear you. I agree. I hear you. It's, it feels like, it feels unfair.
Some of these parcels that have been identified, do they all have driveways on Otter Creek or?
No, not necessarily. No. So what we look at, and let me clarify this a little further. I don't imagine this is a big change here, but we're also looking at the property owner. We don't send it, if any of these are rentals, we don't send it actually to this property, send it to the owner on record. So, and it needs to be a occupied residential dwelling. So we're not tolling the state of Tennessee, you know, in this program either. So.
And what I will share with you all as well is we look at, you know, again, 400 streets in the queue and trying to deliver more of this. Additionally, NDOT now has a program where I know in another part of my district where you have a major park or cultural institution and a collector qualified street, it's not being balanced with voting. You know, NDOT is making the decision based on the volume of traffic and from a safety perspective, and there's no ballot there. So this is a little bit betwixt and between, as I often say, because you've got this major state park. So you know, this has been in the neighborhood traffic calming program queue. You know, came up through COVID, we had the online only. Then I understood that, you know, NDOT was going to change all this. So I said, let's press pause and wait until we have the new process. You know, I am seeing this presentation for the first time as well. I did not know that this would be the organization of the balloting, but I think, you know, what's challenging is this is in the queue, but if this were advanced today, because of the location of Radnor Lake as an institution, I think NDOT would probably, frankly, just move ahead and put them on the road. You know, but this is a neighborhood classified street, even though it's the only road into a major state park. So, you know, this is somewhat difficult because I appreciate that people who live on Shenandoah, we drive over these.
66%.
Of those who vote. That's right. I guess we need 3 at 5 o'clock, something like that. Yes, ma'am. Yep.
So that you all are not on the street and you're not requested here, or?
No, we didn't.
We didn't get one car.
Just so you know, just give them let me just get people from Shenandoah Court stand up so you can see who's represented here.
So I think.
There you are.
No,
I figured, yeah.
I think, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to NDOT about this because, please, it's dinner time. Okay, it's dinner time. Okay, and if we are more fun, I choose not to wait. Yeah, I'm not saying you never have a vote. Okay, I'm not
Well, because you're here.
Okay, appreciate that. I've got to, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I appreciate that the majority of you here are from Shenandoah Court. I think I'm going to take the opportunity to speak to the director just because this has kind of been caught in between. You know, it started under the old process, it's here to new, and so I think, you know, we need to figure out a way to make sure that your voices are heard on it.
2 Otter Creek residents here, you can see where the entrance was.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So, okay, Hannah, can you?
Let's see if there's anything else here. So we, a little bit on time frame, you know, just depending on where we land on the balloting, we like to say we're ready in 2 to 3 weeks. We're probably quicker than that. But then once that goes out, it is a 6-week hard ballot time. That's one of the nice advantages. At the end of 6 weeks, we're done. We know where we stand. But then after that, if it were to pass, then materials is another 2 months, and getting construction scheduled for another 2 months. So people think we're there. We're getting close, but it is still some time out, even from this point tonight. I think that's it. There's my information. I'm the bottom one. I'm Jeff Hammond. Gil Thomas is our program manager there at NDOT. There's both of our emails. Any questions you have, feel free. And again, we'll make this presentation. I hope a lot of the comments are all of in the presentation, because really good comments, and we really appreciate that feedback.
I'm going to
Because we were included in the first one.
Yes, ma'am, you are ready to follow the meeting. Yes, I appreciate that. I'll make sure each of you have this card already, so I guess what I would recommend is we'll not be mailing out ballots today, whatever. I'm going to speak with the director first, so we're going to press pause on this to get him, and so, I think that we're all going to need to go ahead and vote. I know that there are those of you who disagree with these, and so you're just going to vote that. But what I would ask is, folks keep an open mind, because it is not paved into this road. If you put them down, and it's just, a horrible experience for you all, but I will share that my neighbors on Castleman, and I'm happy to forward those to you, I'm happy to put you in touch with the residents who reside on Castleman, young families, children, that was a cut-through street. They put these down, and they were very pleasantly surprised. I know how you feel about residents. Here's what I think is the error with residents, okay, frankly. Wide suburban roads, long suburban roads, it's annoying to cross over all of those. I went and drove down Redford after a shooter, okay? So, this is shorter.
Yeah. So on your Breslin, you actually put a sign up right in front of the first bump, there's not the second road. At the first bump, you said that bump is 10-mile-an-hour bump. I keep going more than 10 miles an hour, I would leave my car. I've had 4 cars that all had every single place. Every single one of them can't go, oh, you have speed bumps in your head because they don't know the thing. These are 4 Mercedes. Every single one of them said it's suspension of parts. Speed bumps everywhere. Determine how that speed bump.
But I think will be important as well, and what I'll kind of submit to you here, I shared with Mr. Hannon, that he mentioned Breslin in the presentation. After getting the feedback from the first presentation, I just shared that we're concerned about Breslin. And so I think it will be important for folks to understand and make the distinction. What's being proposed here, how is Breslin different? And then as well, I would like to get some feedback. I don't, nor have I heard of any other council members from a constituent standpoint. These speed cushions, like Mayor, have been down on a whole lot of streets for several years now. I'm not getting feedback. I serve on the transportation infrastructure committee. We are not getting feedback that people's cars are being messed up.
Drive over and try it. That's all I say.
Okay, so I know you have a feeling about Breslin, and we'll try to be responsive to that.
You're going to talk to Diane.
Oh, one of the things I think restaurants has different ways to go in and out, and if there is a cul-de-sac, can you think of one that first stop, this is the only way that they can go in and out. So,
Right. And I think, neighbors, I just think what the trade-off here is, if you're going over these, you may feel, or you're driving over on Robbie Lee, whatever, I know it's a change, but it's also going to make the streets safer. So it is somewhat of a trade-off. It might not be something that at first it's different, but it is going to make everybody using the road safer. And different people are going to make different value judgments about that. I'm not, if you want to vote no, that's fine. But I do think, I really would encourage you to go drive on Castleman. That's the closest one I know in my district, where I've gotten very positive feedback from those neighbors between Hillsborough Heights and in Trimble.
Probably was 7.
They're the 7.
Probably 7.
so that's all this discussion. You're proposing 7.
Well, 10.
10 is what I heard the most of.
Let the hand put bell on the Hillsborough Road there. You go up that.
I don't know. What street is it on? Not Gray Bar.
Something like that.
No.
I've been on, but
Could be Gray Bar.
Okay.
So